Hello and welcome. If this is your first time visiting, please be sure to check out my other repair videos. To support the channel for free, all you have to do is subscribe, comment, and like. Now let's get on to today's video. Hello guys, and thank you for joining me today. If this is your first time, then I really appreciate you giving me a chance, and I hope you'll come back and visit us again. This will be part 2 of the 2000 Accord head gasket replacement. It could be part 1.5, I'm not exactly sure. I came in today, I was editing the second part where I actually get the head off of the car, and I ran into where it's going to be too long of a video. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. I'll go ahead and put this up tomorrow morning, give you 2 videos this week instead of 1. So one thing that I need to do is I need to show you the parts I bought to replace the head gasket on this car, the price and everything, the part numbers and things like that. So if you're following along, doing exactly what I'm doing, this way we'll all be on the same page. Let me get that out and show it to you. All right, this is the kit that I ordered. It came off of Amazon. I'll put the part number up right here. It's made by a company called Evergreen Engine Parts. This is the same company that I used when I originally rebuilt the engines on both of my Accord and my Civic. I've been pretty happy with it. Not too, maybe a couple little odds and ends here that maybe could have been a little better, but I'm not too worried about it. Now this kit comes with, these are all brand new torque to yield bolts. You've seen a bolt, I don't have to pull that out and show you, but it comes with all 10 that you need. Comes with all the top end stuff, like to put your valve cover back on. It even has like new valve seals, because this is a good chance if you're taking your head off to go ahead and freshen it up and get new valve seals on it. There's actually a plenum manifold for the intake plenum gasket for the intake manifold, and then your ones for your intake and your exhaust are in there also. Of course, the new head gasket for this engine, and they have their version of what I guess is Honda Bond. So this is the kit that I'm going with. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the garage, which is the previous me who's already done that, and we're going to go ahead and start getting this apart and show you what I'm going to do. All right, of course, the first thing you want to do is disconnect your negative battery terminal and get that out of the way so it's not going to have a chance to get up and retouch. We have the radiator draining right now. You see this white wing nut, loosen that up, take your radiator cap off, let all the fluid out. After you think you got it all out, disconnect your upper radiator hose here and pull this up. The reason for all this is that when we go to pull the head up off of this, there is still going to be water or coolant in the jackets around the cylinders and all, and it's going to make a big mess if you don't get as much of that out as you can. So I'm going to let mine sit here a little bit longer, and we'll come back and I'm going to show you what needs to come off the top end, what we're going to go after first. All right, the 3 main components that have to come off, or I should say 4, we're going to go over those real quick. Your distributor needs to come off, your alternator needs to come off, and your power steering pump needs to come off. And finally, we'll get to this later, it's not going to be one of the first things, it's going to be your exhaust manifold has to come off as well. So what I'm going to do without showing you every little step, I'm going to have to get the distributor here off. You have one connection, 2 12mm bolts underneath it that you have to pull out. With your power steering pump, again, I'm not going to show you every single little step, but you need to get the belt off, you loosen it, drop it down, get the belt off, and then we're going to take the whole thing out. We're going to disconnect this hose, move it out of the way. So it's just this part with the high pressure hose here, and we're just going to move that up, like up into this corner here out of the way. With the alternator, you have to loosen that, and there is a nut underneath it. I don't know how well this is going to show up. When you move that nut, it starts to go down, and that loosens the belt. Get the belt off of it, then we're going to disconnect it from its mount. The reason for that is that the power steering pump mount is attached to the head, so that has to come off, but the alternator bracket is on in front of this, so you have to get the alternator bracket off and then take the power steering pump bracket off. So I'm going to get all that done, and we'll come back and show you where we're at. All right, I have the distributor out. All that takes, here's your connector for it here. You pinch and pull it off, and then it has a 12mm nut here and another one back here, and you pull those out and you just pull your distributor straight out. When it comes back to timing this, don't worry, I got you as we get along. Got the distributor wires off. Now with the power steering pump, I have it removed and I have it set up here with this kind of up in the air so that way I'm not losing any fluid. And where that plugs in, I have it wrapped around my hood pin there. And to take that out, I mean, it's just two bolts basically. This needs to go next. This is the bracket for the alternator. It's in front of the one for the power steering, so that's why it's got to go. 3 12mm, and on the side of it, your dipstick is connected here. Go ahead and pull that 10mm and take your dipstick out. All right, with that bracket removed, I'm ready to go after my wiring harness now, because my goal, this where it comes out the end here, handles this side of the engine and some of the things in the back. So my goal is going to be to pick this all the way up and get it just laid over here out of the way. So I need to get back behind everything and start unplugging. Some of this you can get to through the top. You got your idle air control valve there, your intake air temperature gauge there. We have some grounding places on the block that you'll need to find. Mine may be a little bit different from yours because somebody had jury rigged this one in the past. So I'm going to get up under and do that. Also, you have to get behind your intake manifold. There are 3 sensors: your knock sensor, your oil pressure sensor, and then there's one, I'm not sure what it's called, it's attached to your power steering pump. So all that has to come off, including, let's see if I can see you down there. This is your crank position sensor here, then that needs to be undone. So once you get all those undone, we're going to be able to pull this up and go ahead and we're going to be able to pull this up, and go ahead and start worrying about getting the rest of this off. And while we're under there, one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our balancer pulled off the front. We already went over how that much of a problem that can be, and we got to get all these plastics off the front as well. All right, guys, I got the front end of the car jacked up. About as high as I can get it, supported with a jack stand, of course. Just have the driver's side up. And the reason for this, get the tire off, because you can see all this in here we're going to have to be able to get to. And we're going to crawl up underneath the car, behind the engine, above the oil filter. I'm going to show you where to unplug your knock sensor and your oil pressure sending, as well as that's one that's actually plugged into your power steering. Let's crawl under and show you those. All right, I'm going to show you the best I can. The 2 plugs are just above your oil filter right here. I'm going to try to hold the camera and unplug at the same time. I don't think that's going to work. I'll try to get my hand up there. I know y'all have a great view of all this. Okay, so those are the 2 connectors I was going after. This is the knock sensor one. It just has a squeeze on one of the sides. I'm not able to see real good from my angle. And then you have the one for your oil pressure sender that is just that little circle thing that just pulls right off. And then finally, I don't know how well this is going to show, just beside the oil filter, there's this plug that goes into your power steering system right here. There you have it. Let's get back up top and show you where we're at. All right, now looking at we got everything disconnected underneath, of course. So looking at it from up top, this is the bracket I was pointing to. Well, that's going to show up there. Your harness snakes through that. I'm going to see if I can get it out without having to disconnect that, but you may have to. And the last thing here, you can see on the side of the intake manifold, this is the ground block for all of that. So we're going to take this out, and that should free up our wiring harness. If we can get it all the way out right here, then we're going to be just about ready to pull that all the way over to the side. All right, here we are back. What I ended up doing, I just took that bracket off for the power steering pump. High pressure belt here. It's just kind of hanging there. It's probably going to hit the ground at some point. All right, with all this pulled out, I'll just show you what I had. This is that's the one that goes to your crank position sensor. This is the ground strap that attaches on the intake manifold. This one right here, I believe, is for your idle air control. It comes all the way up the back, snakes in there. That's your knock sensor, your oil pressure sending. And this guy here, this is on my wiring harness. I don't know if this is for an automatic or another option that I don't have. It does not connect to anything. I thought it was connected, but it wasn't. It just was zip tied to the harness down there. Is where I left it, because I don't have anywhere to plug that guy into. So basically we're free up here all the way out around the back. So I'm gonna pick that up, get it out of the way. All right, with that done on this end, I'm gonna pull my PCB, because it's going over the top of my wiring harness, And this other part of the PCV valve here needs to come off. Just get it out of the way. I'm going to unplug my EGR valve and my purge valve here. All that's going with the wiring harness. And then we're going to pick it up off of the injectors. We'll unplug each one of those. Of course, there's 4. Okay, I'm going to have to do the injectors two-handed. I'll come back when I get that. All right, with the fuel injectors now unplugged, I can take this whole part of the harness, because I don't care about my paint, just get that out of the way. All right, we're going to move on now. Time for the balancer and the plastics on the front. Now, one thing that I did forget to mention is when you're into the car and you're doing the wiring for the knock sensor and the oil pressure sending, you need to find this guy. He's attached to the bottom of your manifold, and it supports the manifold against the engine like that. And there's just 2 bolts. You need to find that and take it off too. I didn't film it, and after I got back under there and started looking at it, I was like, it's not going to show up good anyway. So just find this, get it off. Moving on. All right, we're at the point now where I'm ready to go ahead and take the plastics off the front, the timing belt cover. Hopefully you've watched the first video of this and you have your crank bolt out of the car already, because you have to pull the balancer off, and that crank bolt has to come off to get the plastics off. And so the plastics will have to come off in this order. The first thing is your valve cover, because it's holding this one down, then this one comes off, and then the bottom one. The valve cover is just 10 millimeter bolts and nuts on top. We're going to go ahead and set up and take those out. All right, with those out, you're ready to go ahead and lift your valve cover off. Make sure you had your PCV stuff disconnected and anything else that might be hooked to it, wire loom or whatever. You'll probably have to use a screwdriver. You just want to find a place to get underneath it. Shouldn't be too difficult to get off. The main thing, again, just don't scratch your mating surfaces. You are free. We'll flip that over in case there's any oil in it. All right, with the valve cover free, we're going to go ahead. You have a 10 millimeter here, and there's another one kind of recessed back here. It's just those 2, and then that just pulls off. I'll go ahead and do that off camera, and then we're going to have to go down underneath and show you what has to happen to get the bottom timing belt cover off the car. All right, with the cover off, you see you have the cam gear and the timing belt exposed. One thing I should mention here is your connector for your crank position sensor, and it's actually connected in this area, and it actually snakes through part of that lower plastic. So go ahead and pop that off of its little mount and just let it hang down below the car. You'll be fine as long as you don't catch it on anything. All right, we're ready to go after the balancer now, and I'm going to show you, of course, we've got the crank bolt out, and there is a keyway in here that locks the balancer to the end of your crankshaft. Now, if you're lucky, all you really have to do is to reach in here and kind of wiggle this side to side, and it should pull off. There could be a situation where that could get tight, but fortunately I don't have that problem with this one. With the balancer off now, we're going to take a closer look. You have this, and this. Those are the 3 lower bolts that hold that on, and then there are 2 more at the top. I've already removed the top ones. Let's grab those 3 there. We should be able to just pop that right off now. All right, with that last one loose, we're ready to pull this out. Again, here is your wire for your crank position sensor. Make sure that's disconnected from the plastic. The whole thing should just pull off and just kind of work it out. All right, let me get in here and show you what we got now. All right, so this is your main timing belt. It goes across your cam gear, behind your water pump, around the tensioner, and then across the crank gear and back up here. This car is equipped with 2 timing belts. This isn't really a timing belt, but it does have to be timed. This engine has a shaft here, and there's one on the back. There are rods or cylinders that are counterweighted. They run through the engine, and those things spin in that counterweighted fashion is to reduce engine vibration. So this does actually have to be in time with your timing belt. So unfortunately, both of these belts have to come off. If you're doing a timing belt on this car, you also have to remove your motor mount. So what you would do is just support the engine from the bottom with a jack to hold it up where it's at. And this should have like 2 studs coming through with nuts on top of that. This is a jury rig thing I did when mine broke off of my mount before. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to get the engine to top dead center. So what I'm going to do, this is your number 1 spark plug tube here, and I'm with one hand over this, and then over here inside the wheel well, I have my 19mm back on. I've reinstalled the crank belt temporarily. I just ran it down and gave it one ugga-dugga with the impact wrench, because I'll have to rotate the engine counterclockwise, which will of course loosen it. So that's why it's just a little bit tight. I'm going to rotate this as I'm reaching over with my left hand. I'm going to feel for compression coming up, and once I feel the compression coming up, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to show you how to make sure we got it at top dead center after that. All right, I'm all set up here, ready to reach over and feel the poof. One thing you can do is to make sure, or you can watch your cam gear as it comes around. It has a tooth that says up, and when that's in the up position, that's at top dead center. But it could be on the compression, the exhaust stroke. So you want to feel compression when that comes up. If you don't feel it, you're not on your compression stroke. I'm on the compression stroke. Listen, you can hear a little poof. And now I'm just going to keep going until I see that cam gear straight up and down. I will try to get the camera in there and show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, this is the spoke here, and it has the word up on it. So when that came up and I have it pointing straight up in conjunction with the head, with my hand over the number 1 tube, you heard it poof when I came up, so I know I'm at top dead center on my compression stroke here. So the engine is basically where it needs to be, minus a few minor adjustments to put that timing belt back on. But I think it's best to start, if you're going to take the head off, to have everything where it's supposed to be with the crank. So when you put the head back on, you can just, before you go to bolt it down, you can go and get this spun back up to up and have it almost in time, so you don't have any collisions between the valves and the pistons. All right, let's move along. Okay, now with all that taken care of underneath, I'm ready to take the belts off of the front, so I have to loosen the tensioners. Now, since you have 2 belts, this car has 2 tensioners. The one that you can actually see here is for the bounce shaft gears, and then the one that actually has the timing belt run across the top of it here. They're all held on partially with this 14mm here. I'll get that broke loose. I'm not going to take it off, and then I'm going to move under the car and show you what we're about. All right, this is probably the camera angle you see most when you see people working on the timing belts on the F23. This is the only way you can really show it with the engine in the car. But you can always go back to my original videos and see this out of the car and see actually how everything gets put together. So my first goal again is going to be to take the and I'm kind of working blind here too, but to take that outside tensioner off. We've already loosened this 14mm here. This little arm, there's that comes across, and it's actually holding a spring, which is back here, and that spring is hooked to the tensioner to pull it, I think, down in this case. So what I need to do is loosen this 10mm on this little arm that runs across here, and then I can go ahead, I'll be able to move this a little better, and I'm just going to unhook that spring and put it in a safe place. I'm just going to get that finger tight, or loose. Sorry, that's finger loose. So everything is pretty free back here now. Grab this spring that's on the end of that. Well, I'm just going to let it hang because this does have to come off. So now I'm ready to take that 14mm out, run it out by hand. It's just a nut that's on top of that little stud sticking out. And I can go ahead and pull that tensioner, the front of the tensioner off, this little piece here. Once I remove this nut here. Okay, there you go. That's the piece I was after, and you can see the spring hangs off the bottom and it pulls up, or somehow it pulls down. I think it's actually, it pulls this up, which actually rotates this whole assembly to go down, is the idea there. I'm ready to take the front tensioner off now. Catch that washer that just fell. That's the one for the nut that goes on the front of that. And with all that loose, I can actually take this off now. Snakes around, and there you have it. Okay, I've run the crank bolt back out, and my Woodruff key has stayed in. Sometimes those can, but it goes all the way back through the actual gear that goes around the crank. We're not taking that off, so maybe we'll get lucky. We won't have to fool with it. But just keep in mind, it's possible you could pull that out when you're taking these gears off. This one's, there's no puller or anything needed there. That just comes straight off. And if you're unfamiliar with the parts of your engine down here, of course, this is your crank sticking out. This is your rear balance shaft, your front balance shaft, and then up here is your water pump. And this is the bar that both of your tensioners right on here. It's your crank gear, of course, your crank sticking out, and this guy back here is your crank position sensor. So my next step is going to be to take the tension off of this belt now. With all of this loose, I mean, I could probably just wiggle that this part out here, but what I'm going to do, because I don't want to lose it, there's a spring that goes up here that's hooked behind this tensioner, and you need to get that off and put it in a safe place. If you try to just leave it hanging or something, it could fall on the floor and get swept up and you'll never see it again. I'm gonna come up from the top now. I don't know how well you can see this, but if this is your tensioner here, I'm gonna come, there's a spring behind it, it's like hanging on a hook, and I'm just gonna pull it up and off that hook and then take it off of the tensioner. That's what I was going after. Now this tensioner is ready to come off. Just like that. Another thing that I will point out, that there are timing marks on this gear. It actually has a tooth that has a triangle on it. That's your top dead center tooth. It also lines up with your Woodruff key. So when you know where that Woodruff key is at top dead center, or just pointing, you know, at 12 o'clock, you know that the crank is at top dead center. So this is right, my cam is right. I'm not going to do anything to touch this again. I'm going to take the belt off. I'm going to leave it down here because it doesn't matter, we're not replacing it. But I'm going to take it off of the top on the cam gear, and then we're ready to start pulling the head actually off of the car.